Hi, this is Natasha. Just a really quick video addressing some common misunderstandings and some common questions that I've been receiving. I figured if I'm getting these questions from some of you, then maybe more of you would benefit from the answers. Okay, so the English language is made up of 44 phonemes. Different combinations of different phonemes make all of our rich vocabulary that we use every day in our spoken language and in our reading and writing. Now, this is a box with 44 boxes on here, and within each box, I've just shown one way that each phoneme can be represented, because at the end of this video, I'm going to go through the different ways that you pronounce those clearly and with pure pronunciation, making sure that you don't have the schwa at the end. First of all, though, I want us to have a look at this letter. And if I were in a room full of you now, I would ask you what this letter is, and hopefully all of you would tell me that it's the letter A. Now, some of you might go back to your phonetic system and say that it's an A. I would hope that you wouldn't do that though, because this isn't quite right all of the time, and I'm going to explain why. So first of all, we're going to separate the GPC correspondences, and we're going to look at them as separate graphemes and phonemes. So a grapheme is the visual representation of a phoneme. It's that squiggle that you have on a page that represents the different phonemes in our language. Just in the same way that this squiggle on the right could have easily represented lots of our phonemes, we've gone for these clean, easily created letters that we can all form ourselves, albeit in a slightly different handwriting. But the grapheme, the visual representation at this point, doesn't actually link to any phonemes. It's just a shape that carries meaning, but as yet we don't know what that meaning is. So at this point, this is a letter A. It's a grapheme. It's a visual shape on a page that carries some kind of meaning once we can link it to our phonetic code. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that you hear within a word. And as I said at the beginning, there are 44 different phonemes in the English language, but there are many, many, many different ways that we can spell each of the phonemes. But at this point, we're not interested in spelling them. We're just interested in hearing the different phonemes in words and breaking them down into their smallest units. So this is where we oral blend and oral segment, and this is crucial to be able to develop phonemic awareness. So when we are talking, when we are using our spoken language, we don't need any letters at all, but we do need phonemes. We do need to be able to articulate the different phonemes within each word to be able to speak clearly and articulate and communicate with people around us. So when we are working with early readers, and please remember that early readers are not always 4, 5, and 6. They may be 11 or 16 or 25 or 53. An early reader can be any age, but when you are working with an early reader, what we are doing is developing their knowledge of how graphemes and phonemes correspond with each other. So how a visual representation on a page can represent the phonemes that we hear in our spoken language so that we are able to read and we are able to write. So if we have a look at this group of letters at the top of the page, we'll all agree that they all look visually quite different. They carry similarities, but they all look quite different because we've used different fonts. We have used some in italics. We've got some that are in capital form and some are in lowercase. But if I were to ask you all the question, what's your name? You would all tell me that each one of those letters would say A. They are all called A. Their letter name is A. Even though they don't look exactly the same, they still all have the same name, just in the same way that all people called Sarah look different. Doesn't mean their name is not Sarah. So when we ask the question, what's your name, to each one of those letters, they are all called A. So sometimes I hear teachers referring to the capital letter being called A and the lowercase being an A. That's not quite right. They are all called A. That is their name. What do you look like is referring to the grapheme element, that visual representation on a page. Now the graphemes, as we can see here, can vary, but they are all carrying real similar traits that make it a letter A. So the capitals will have a triangular shape with a line across the middle, and the lowercase letters will all have a circle with a flick or a tail of some kind. Some are slightly more flicky than others, but you can see what I mean. So what is your name, the letter name, they're all A. And the grapheme, the visual representation, can vary depending on font and handwriting, but they all carry similarities that make them recognizable to everybody as the letter A. The next question is where it gets more complicated, and this is why grapheme and phoneme correspondences can be hard to teach the more you progress through the systematic synthetic phonics program. So at first, we are looking at the letter A within each of these words, and have purposely made them all look exactly the same, so they've all got the same grapheme throughout. Even though they all look the same, they are all very different when we come to understand our phonetic code here. So in the first word, the letter A is making or representing the phoneme A. Ant. And when we first start teaching early readers about the GPCs, the grapheme and phoneme correspondences, the letter A making the phoneme A is the first one we teach because it's so common and is in most of the simpler words. Then we introduce, as we progress through our systematic program, the letter A, the grapheme, can also represent the phoneme A in words like baby. It can represent the phoneme R in words like father, and it can represent the phoneme O in words like swan. So if we go back to the first thing I said, when people look at the letter A on a page, if they refer to it as A, that's great. If they say it's an A, then that's why that's where misconceptions develop, because it's not always an A. Sometimes it's an A, sometimes it can be an A or an R or an O. That's where it graphs one letter making one sound. But then you can also put the letter A as a combination, so pairing them up with another letter in the digraphs, two letters making one sound. So the blue ones here are digraphs, two letters together that make one phoneme. So if you put an A and an I together, they can represent the phoneme A in words like aim. If you put it with the letter O, it can represent the phoneme O in words like oat. Then if we look at the orange ones here, we've got some trigraphs. If you put an A, an I and an R together, that can represent the phoneme air in words like hair, then in ear, and so on. And sometimes you have four letters together that make one phoneme. So the A, the I, the G and the H in the word straight represent the phoneme A. So you can see here how it gets really complicated through our phonetic code, which is why people find phonics so complex. At its simplest, what you need to remember is that this shape that you see on the screen is called a grapheme. It's a visual representation of some phonemes within our words. And its letter name is, part of the alphabet, they're the letter names. The letter name is A, regardless of whether it's capital letter or lowercase, it's called an A. Now that grapheme links to different phonemes, and depending on the word it's in or depending on the partnering it has, it can be pronounced in different ways. So the phonemes that we hear can be presented in lots and lots of different ways, and it's really important we understand that. Okay, moving on to pure pronunciation. We need to make sure that when we're working with early readers, we model pure pronunciation without the schwa, which basically means without having the at the end. Adding in that or that schwa at the end makes blending more complicated for early readers. So we need to model pure pronunciation. We need to teach pure pronunciation if we're going to help our early readers succeed more quickly. So let's have a look at this phoneme chart again. As I said, it's 44 phonemes, but just one way to represent each phoneme. But each of the phonemes is represented here, so you'll be able to hear all 44 pronounced correctly. I think it's really important to also understand that people's accents can impact on our pronunciation. And so we need to bear that in mind when we're supporting children with their spelling and with their reading, particularly if we're in an area where our accent differs from the children we are teaching. That said, even though our accent does impact, our accent is we've got it covered within the 44 phonemes, so all of the phonemes are included in there. So it's also, for example, if I was to give you the word P-A-T-H, I would say that word as path, and I would segment it as p-a. Some people would pronounce that word as path, and they would segment it as p-arth. So it's really important we understand that, and don't underestimate how much accent can impact on our phonics teaching. Okay, so I'm going to go from left to right, and I'm going to pronounce each of the phonemes without the schwa, but I will also, for the most common ones that are mispronounced correctly, are mispronounced, I'm going to tell you what it's not. So I will tell you what it is and what it's not. A, I, O. Now, the reason this one is red is because accent does heavily impact on this and the pronunciation of the phoneme. So some people might pronounce it more of an and some people might pronounce it more as an O. So it really is quite a different one for accents, and something to bear in mind. A, E, I, O, U, U. Now, U and U are often confused with one another because they do sound so similar, but we've got an U in words like moon, and we've got a U in words like unicorn. Air, ear, year, or your, depending again on your accent. These two are also ones that get confused because one is much shorter than the other. So this is a short phoneme in words like teacher, and this is in words like fur, or, oi, ow, s, not s, t, not t, p, not p, not n, not m, d, g, k, not k, r, not r, not h, b, f, not f, o, not l, y, v, w, w, j, x, v, sh, not sh, ch, zh. Now, zh is often represented with a ZH to remind us that it's different to the two S's are different, but zh is often spelt with an S in words like treasure and pleasure. As usual, if you find my training helpful, please contact me, thephonicsqueen@gmail.com, to arrange bespoke training for your school or setting.